All right, guys, it's time for the Next Level Guy Show, a men's interview, interest, and improvement-focused podcast featuring interviews with the greats from all industries to help you better your life. Each week, a new episode features an interview with one of the greats, covering all aspects of their story, from life hacks to tips and protocols that have allowed them to live life on the next level. We then highlight concrete action steps that you can use to improve your life. And now, your host, Ian Dawson McKay.
Hello and welcome to the Next Level Guy podcast, a show built around one mission: helping men rebuild themselves from the ground up. We cover identity, emotional mastery, discipline, capability, physical mastery, purpose, and so much more. What if one of the most expensive mistakes you're making with food has nothing to do with how you cook, but instead it's what you don't know about the meat you're buying? In this episode, I sit down with Brad Baych for round 2. We unpack why so many of us are overpaying, under-flavouring, and missing out on some of the best cuts of the cow, not because we're bad cooks, but because no one has ever showed us what to look for. Once you know what you're cooking with, you can make that meal sing as if it's from the heavens and impress those in your life. Brad shares butcher-level insights that instantly upgrade how you shop, how you cook, and how you think about the food on your plate. It's practical, it's grounding, and honestly, it gives you that quiet confidence that comes from knowing what you're doing, instead of just guessing. And yes, it also makes a cracking Christmas gift for the foodie in your life. Brad Baych is a butcher, chef, YouTube educator, and published author who helps everyday guys cook better meat, save serious money, and stop feeling lost in the supermarket aisle. From fine dining kitchens to breaking down whole cuts of meat at home, his mission is simple: teach what most of us were never taught. Listen to this one, and you won't just cook better. You'll move through life with a bit more calm, control, and respect for what's on your plate. And you'll also eat like a king. And now, let's get to the interview. Well, thank you so much for coming back on. Usually I say welcome to the show, but for a legend like yourself who's coming back for round 2, welcome back. You came in as the meat guy, the go-to guy who would explain how to cut meat and save money. Now you've evolved into this go-to meat maestro, this amazing guy who's built this dynamic audience, people coming, flocking to you to find out tips and hacks, and now a published author. How's this evolution been going for you?
It's been going great. I've been on YouTube now for a little over 3 years, and YouTube is crazy. Once you think you have it figured out, you learn you don't have it figured out. And then, just trying to really have just more content, more videos, trying to be as helpful as possible. I used to teach culinary school, so this is like my way of giving back and teaching and really, trying to get people to understand how to save money on meat, where their meat comes from, and all those kind of little minutia about butchery that'll help them out in the long run.
And do you think this writing the book was this sort of evolution of, this is where your channel, this love of meat, where you're teaching, your skills have been pushing you? Or did you see a gap in the market?
Well, this book is a little different than your typical cookbook because it does have so much information about how to break down the cuts of meat. So it's a little bit of a butchery guide and also a cookbook together. So I think there is a little bit of gap in that market of, people understand, how to cook a basic piece of meat, but they may not understand some of the more intricate cuts, the ones they may have never even heard of. And I think this book does a good job of telling you what those cuts of meat are, where they come from on the cow, and what recipes and the way to cook them that you're going to get the best result from. So, the beef is so much. There's so many different textures and flavors, and you know, each cut is a little different. And you gotta treat it a little different. So it like I said, this book really just kind of really hammers home those ideals and like these extra pieces of meat that you may not know of.
Because when I first started going into it, I was like, "Oh, great! It's got some really lovely recipes, and like I was salivating just looking at the pictures, the vibrancy and the dynamic. It just looks so good. You could lick the page. It was that good. But when you start going in, you were talking about the grading, how it's aged, how they're fed. You talk about the anatomy, but then you go into the butchery, then accessories. It's like a Meatopedia. I was trying to think. I was hoping that wasn't offensive when I said it in my head originally, because it's just the depth and the love. But you can see where your skills as a teacher, as a butcher, and then as a professional cook, you've said, how do we make this as easy for people to use and as quick and efficient? You've even considered how many pots to use and what accessories to have to make it look good, but make it easier for you to produce for your family and things like that. And I love that you've obviously listened to your students over the years and learned where their pain points are and found these things to fit. But your first job was, you talk about in the book, you were a lead soup cook. Now you went from cooking at home and into a restaurant. What was that change like initially to go into a more professional standard of cooking?
Yeah, it's funny. I've always been in restaurants, and that first job was, I was 16 years old. It was the first job I ever had. And I wandered in off the street from this new restaurant that was opening, and they were kind of hiring everybody. And at that point, I'm like, sure, yeah, I'll learn how to do it. Or I would love to go in there and cook. And then, the rest is kind of history. I got the bug for working in restaurants and learning how to cook on a big scale because it is much different. And I just had that love of restaurants and hospitality, and I've always been in that area. No matter, I always come back to it. Also, so when I was in college, I just came back to that working in a restaurant or working in a hotel. I went to culinary school again, came back to the restaurants. So it just seems like I just really want to help people and I really want to feed people. And that gets in your blood. People who worked in restaurants, you can always pick them out because they know, they feel like, they have that hospitality gene, I think. And you really want to have just, whether you're having the dinner at home or at a restaurant, you want to just take care of people.
Because that's what I like about it in the book is like you don't just say your story and then go into the book. You actually flow your story through the book. You're giving the hints, the tips. You're taking your warm that affectionate personality that we all love. It's littered throughout the book, and I think that's the thing is we know more about you, but also understand and see the evolution of your skills through the book as you go. Then when you did go in there, you do talk about how people struggle for the time management, the patience, those little kind of thinking two steps ahead. What did that start teaching you about prep, understanding volume, those kind of skills where all men like myself really struggle?
Yeah, I think it's also what being in restaurants or professional kitchens really teach you is how to produce at a large scale, but also do more than one thing at a time. So having a plan, looking at a recipe and breaking it down and saying, okay, this is how I need to cook this piece of meat. This is how I need to make this recipe. So what do I need to do? What can I be doing simultaneously to make it go a little quicker, a little easier? Can I add these two? Can I put these two ingredients in at the same time? Can I be heating up the stock that I'm going to use for this recipe? Can I be heating that up at the same time and it makes it more efficient? I think the home cook can definitely grab a lot of those things out of a good cookbook where you're like, okay, I need to like sear this off and then add the vegetables, then add the stock. It's kind of like a formula. And once you know how to like braise a dish, how to stew, how to grill, saute, you can do it with anything. So it's a good proxy to learn how to cook anything.
Because in the book, I like how you've set it up into the primal cuts rather than, the basic dinner, breakfast, dessert, where you've kind of gone, here's a section of an animal, and this is how we're going to break it down. And then you showed the variety of these mouth-watering recipes you can go from there. But when you were talking initially in the book, you say about how you all your friends were bagging groceries. And instead of just enjoying your easy job, you went, I'm going to go and go the next step. So you became a kind of steakhouse apprentice where you met was an Angel who's demonstrated cutting up rib. How, where did that enthusiasm come? Was it you, were you falling in love with it? And what was that first kind of whoa moment when you saw him cutting up these humongous chunks of meat?
Yeah, so that story is great. As I was really my first fine dining job was at a fine dining steakhouse in the town where I grew up, and I was a saute cook, and so I worked in the evenings when the place when it was open, and then one of the head chef asked me if I would come and help out with the prep one day. So I worked kind of all day that day. I came in early and I met Angel, and he was the prep cook, but he basically for the steak, it was a steakhouse. So his job was to break down a lot of these steak cuts. So a lot of ribeyes, strips, um, tenderloins. And I watched him do it. And, it's when you watch somebody do a skill that they've done 1,000 times and it looks so effortless and
Yeah.
it looks like magic that he just went ahead and knew exactly where to cut and he knew exactly how his knife was supposed to go through. And it was really kind of poetry in motion. It really was. And I watched him do that and I'm like, man, I need to learn how to do that. So I spent the next couple of weeks like just coming in on my off time and going, okay, I'm going to just watch him do his thing. And they let me, try it and they trained me on the correct way to do it. And that was my first kind of foray into meat butchery because I hadn't even gone to culinary school yet. That was just me getting a job at a fine dining steakhouse. So when I did go to culinary school, it was like, okay, when we got to meat class, not only was I ahead of the game with the other students, I was like, I can definitely do this and do it well.
Because that comes across on the page was your own journey, your own kind of experience of living it, and and you say it and you make it sound so much fun, but something that came across was when you said that you badgered the manager to let you have a shot at the end of a shift, that you wanted to learn the grill. You could have just sat and did your station and mastered that, but you saw like the fluidity, the art of the butchery cuts. what what advice would you give to somebody who maybe wants to take that next step in their career, who maybe is wanting to go to their boss and say, I want to try that, I want to do that? Where did you find that confidence from?
Well, I think it was just a passion of I wanted to always do kind of what I always want to move to the next stage. I wanted to move up. So whatever I was doing, and you could see what the hierarchy was. That's the next thing I wanted to learn. And I think with things like the restaurant is really easy to do so because you can definitely tell the hierarchy very quickly. I'm sure in other industries it may be a little more difficult to work your way up, but in a restaurant you can do so very quickly by going like, I want to work that station, and okay, that guy's going to be off for vacation. Well, I'll work his station, and then all of a sudden more than one station, and you can work your way up that way. So I think I've always just been driven that way to kind of go to that next level. Like I'm happy where I'm at, but I'm not happy where I'm at. So I want to go
Wow.
to that next thing.
Because that's what I always love about you is like it's this kind of, you're just so you feel like you're so full of passion and love for what you're doing. You can feel the enthusiasm emanating off you. Do you find that that's part of it, was that they kind of looked at you and knew that you weren't going to just settle? They had like another budding person and they wanted to teach you. How did you learn the nuances of cutting and learning from mistakes at that age?
Yeah, I just think it's yes, when you put forth the passion into something like you're at a restaurant, you're doing your restaurant job, it's very evident because there are lots of people are working for lots of reasons, and some of them are just want a paycheck and they just want to clock in and clock out. And then for me, like I said, I always wanted to learn more, do more. And I found it interesting because you'd be doing your job, but you'd be looking at what the other person's doing. Like, I want to do that over there too, or I want to be known as the guy who can do everything, and I can be plugged in anywhere. So, like I said, I think it's just a internal thing where I want to learn more, and then I think the jobs I've worked at have seen that, especially at a young age, and gone, okay, this guy knows what he wants to do more, so I'm going to teach him more. I had an older chef at that particular restaurant, and he wanted to teach a lot. He really liked to teach people, but he didn't want to teach people who didn't want to learn. So he would pick and choose who he taught very, very carefully.
I think we've all had a manager like that. It's like, but you get out what you put into it, and I think that comes across with you is like that you're always wanting to learn, you're always wanting to grow and try new things. And I think sadly a lot of guys kind of just sit back and go, "No, I can't do that. I don't want to do that." And I think that's very one of the sort of inspirational things that comes off the page. What did you find with working with the likes of Angel, etc.? What did it teach you about building friendships and connections? Because, you work side by side with these guys, feeding hundreds, prepping for all day and that. What did it teach you about building friendships? Because you were young compared to a lot of these line chefs, but what did it teach you about building that friendships?
Yeah, I think for the restaurant industry in general too, when you're working at night, you're working on in holidays, you're working when everyone else is celebrating, right? That's kind of the basis of that business. So you are friends with the people that you work with, and because you don't have really anybody else, it's kind of it's a weird schedule, it's a weird clock, but so it's almost like when I played football in high school. You really needed to count on the person next to you because you're all trying to get that common goal done. So it's you really take the person next to you and you're like, okay, we're going to get through this, we're going to get done. It may be a thing in a restaurant where all of a sudden you're slammed and there's every seat is full and everyone orders at the same time. And you're like, okay, we're going to sit and we're going to do this. And you build those friendships by being in the fire, so to speak, doing something together. And I think that's another part I really liked about the restaurant business was that it is such a team environment because, you are all in different stations. So a whole meal doesn't come from just my station. There's something over here, there's something over there, and they all come together. So I think you build those friendships, you build those bonds while you're in the fire.
No, I love it because it makes perfect sense. Because a lot of people have never been customer focused, high volume, high stress jobs like that. And there was a guy on Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares who would eat sugar sandwiches, and he would be drinking beers while he's cooking. And then obviously didn't know why things went shit. Basically, what did you learn about like your keeping yourself healthy, your time management, dealing with guys maybe shouting at you, maybe dealing with making mistakes and not panicking, communicating, like you needed an extra minute so the guy the pass knew, those sorts of things? Because being at such a young age, that's a high pressure job to go into at any age, but especially when you're younger. How did you build these habits?
Yeah, I think it's just one thing leads to another. So you're not going into work till later in the afternoon. So then you're going to have to really get your home life situated before you go in. And then, because when you get in, you have to be totally focused on what you're doing. Not only at this steakhouse, but I went on further, especially after culinary school, to a really like a it was five diamond hotel in Dallas, and that's where we cooked for like celebrities, and we cooked for everything was very expensive, and that was even more of a high stress job because you take that it was such a big operation, but we still need to make everything perfect. So again, it's all these, and you have people yelling at you. You have people, even at the hotel was interesting because you'd have people from room service who were yelling at you, and you'd have people, your chef and the sous chefs, and you'd have to kind of like take it all, organize it in your brain and then go ahead and cook it. And I think it's the only way you can do that successfully, I think, is to be in that situation over and over and over again. Because you do get a callous mind. You do get like, okay, he's yelling at me, but I know that's not like, that's just a situation.
Yeah.
We're going to go and, we're gonna be friends later. It's not that personal. It's just getting the job done. So I think that's that repetition really helps you out with that.
Because to be able to sort of absorb criticism and go, no, okay, I know this isn't aimed at me. This is aimed at the situation. That he's just reacting to stress in maybe a more volatile way than I would like. To be able to do that at such a young age is really impressive. Did you find, was there a point where you thought maybe this career wasn't for me, or was it always just the joy learning, cooking for like vice presidents and musicians and all these sort of things? Was that more always outweighing the negative?
It was I never could see myself doing anything else. I was locked in from that very first time. That 16 years old, I was just locked into a restaurant. I really enjoyed the pace. I enjoyed working with your hands, keeping everything moving, keeping your brain sharp, and it was just one thing kind of led to another. The only thing that really stopped my restaurant career or in my food career was when when we had kids and I was needed at home more than I was needed in a restaurant. So that's when I made that transition, or I'd probably still be in a restaurant today.
So I mean, when you then started like doing the reps in the dark, as they like to call it, where you started thinking, I'm going to make a couple of YouTube videos. I'll see how it goes. But you kept them away from your wife. Even when you were doing like culinary school and things like that, you never kind of thought, I'm going to advertise this. And now you've become this go-to person who we all look to and go, how do I do this? Right. I'm going to watch his amazing videos. Oh, he's got he started teaching people how to do this. Oh, brilliant. Okay, I'm going to go and sign up for this. He's got a book out. Brilliant. I can now sign up for that. You're teaching the next generation of people, especially when meat's so expensive at the minute. Was there ever a point that you just thought, I don't know what I'm doing? How has that changed you as a person? Now going from creator to almost leader, kind of, I don't know, like in charge of everything, inspiring the next generation of cooks.
Well, first of all, thank you for that for saying that, because I do want to inspire people to get more confident in the kitchen and more confident with how they even go to the grocery store and buy their meat and buy different ingredients. I think there's a lot of information that is not been available to the public. Like people just haven't shared it.
Oh.
And it's been saved for people who are learning how to do the butchery art, and it's been passed on. But I think there are things that the home cook can get out of that, and that's what I want to share. Because meat prices in general are going up, and there are little nuances that people can save money. And I want to continue to share those in any medium I can. We talked to a couple, YouTube. I got a book out. We have a different, there's a membership where we can get one-on-one. Like there's all kinds of things. I want to hit as many people as possible in as many different ways as possible. But again, just teaching that same thing over and over again so that people get more confident. Because I think you got to hear it a bunch of times. You got to do it some, and then you get your confidence.
Well, because in one of Tim Ferriss's book, he talks about learning. I think maybe it's 4 Hour Chef, where he talks about learning to cook, and you don't try to cook something when you've got your date on the couch or when you've got people coming, like your family visiting. You learn to cut things up. Maybe it was like cutting onions when you're watching TV, so there's no stress. There's no, But when you're using something like this massive slab of meat, how do you learn the nuances, make mistakes, but not kind of panic because you've cut maybe this too wrong, or you've really trimmed it into the usable meat where you wouldn't try to take the fat off, for example? How do you learn, make mistakes, but not panic as much, because meat just now, it's obscenely priced.
Yeah.
How can we start this process?
So I suggest that people start out, if you're brand new and you want to get better at cutting these big cuts of meat, I started with pork. So pork is much less expensive. And I have a video on my channel in which we take the 4 basic kind of butcher knife skills and
Mhm.
practice on pork. So you're going to do it for much less. And if you need to, you can grind it all anyway and to make sausage and stuff like that. So, but it'll help you get those basic knife skills down before you want to start on something that's big and expensive. There's also, when you're doing those big projects, the ribeye, the strip, those are 2 great ones to start out with, because they are very straightforward.
Mhm.
You're taking a big cut of meat and you're cutting into a smaller cut of meat. That's all you're doing. There's some little bit of trimming involved depending on how much fat you want to leave on it. But all in all, you are just taking this and slicing it, and you end up saving a ton of money. That's the crazy part. Uh, and it's not that much work. You just got to kind of bite the bullet. You can do it and give it a try.
Because something that really comes across, like in your videos, but also in the book, is it's littered with these like really helpful comments, like about how the tenderer the cuts are, more away from the horn and the hoof. How you can buy a particular type of cut where you have more expensive cuts in it without, but you pay for the cheaper kind of cut because you're buying the larger part. And how you can use certain marinades and tools to take a cheaper cut and make these amazing meals. For people who wanted to start, I mean, you focused on beef in this one. What is for example, what's maybe an impressive thing to make for a girlfriend, but is limited in terms of what skill and time you need? What would blow people's socks off, but helps a newbie sneak their way into recognition they probably don't deserve?
One of my favorite dishes of all time is steak au poivre. So that is a strip steak that is simply just seared and roasted in a pan, and then you use the pan. You take the steak out while it rests and make a pan sauce. Pan sauces are great to like make it more fancy without it's not very hard to do. So you take the steak out, and that poivre part means pepper in French. So you can put green peppercorns or black pepper. And then there's brandy, which flambés. So if you're trying to impress somebody, you can flambe, and uh, and then uh,
I'm getting hungry now.
and then add a little bit of beef stock and thicken it up, and it's super quick and makes a delicious sauce. But it's very easy to do. You're talking about maybe like 4 or 5 ingredients, and it turns out great. The brandy flavor is great. The pepper makes it a little peppery bite. It's one of my favorite just dishes of all time, and it's easy.
Because something that jumps out in the book is it's not just here's a cat of meat, throw some potatoes or some sauteed cabbage or whatever. You've actually, it's not just like a steak on a plate or a particular cut of this. You've actually made it into a meal. You've based it, like you've created a food art around it. You've made it part of the thing. How do you go through those recipes and go, okay, that is what you could do at home. That's what you could do if you've got 4 screaming kids. That's what you could do if you're having to do something cooking quick for dinner or you're batch cooking. How have you kind of picked that recipes to showcase the skill, make them tasting amazing, but also not have about 9 years of washing up to do?
Yeah. I really wanted, when I picked the recipes for this book, I really wanted to make sure that it was varying kinds of recipes. So we have some kind of, you have some Mexican inspired ones. We have some just straightforward how to grill, how to and different simple sauces to go with it. So I tried to make it, there are some braised dishes or stews and something where you can just really get that piece of meat to be different. Because that was one of the biggest challenges of doing an all beef book was there's 100 recipes in there and you had to make them different because you can't just say grill steak, put on plate and be done. So it was, different spice mixtures, different ways to cook. I even threw in one of the things I thought was really cool is I threw in 2 pizzas. So you put steak on your pizza. They actually turned out really good. That was one of the ones that I kind of like, I hadn't done before, but I kind of knew what the flavors are going to be like. And I'm like, I think you could put steak on a pizza. And then we made it and we did it a couple times. And this is really good. And there's also some just using different equipment. I tried to use not just a grill, but indoor cooking, outdoor cooking. There's things there's soups in there. The ground beef recipes I really like because those are like what I cook at home. There's spaghetti and meatballs. There's Italian wedding soup. There's a vegetable beef soup. Those are things that like what my kids ask for when I'm like, what do you want me to make for dinner? That's the stuff that they want. And I wanted definitely to add those things in too, because those are like your crowd pleaser, kid friendly kind of dishes.
I want them just now, and I'm just like on the other side of the world, because I think that's what comes across is it's they're not just dinners, they're occasions, but they're also like comfort food, heartwarming, soul nourishing food. But then there's also the lighter foods. Then there's like the soups and there's the pizzas. And, normally you think of beef as this big, heavy, stodgy, kind of packed with sauce. And, you have to lie down for 3 days after you've eaten it. Whereas a lot of this is kind of like these delicate little nibbles, but then it's also the heartwarming stuff as well. How would you want somebody approaching this to use it? Say that you give them 30 days starting now, they buy the book. How would you want them to become engrossed in this? Because like you said, there's 100 recipes, which blew my mind. I didn't even know there was that many types of beef dishes. But, how would you want them to start building their experience, their skills? Which kind of meals would you get them to pick and then kind of move on to maybe because maybe making dough is something they're struggling with, but putting a rub on a meat might be easier. How do we balance this and progress?
Yeah, I think the easiest thing to do, what I would like someone to take from this book is to be able to go to the grocery store and say and find oh, I found this cut of meat. How should I cook it? And, and I found a chuck eye steak, and that's something that not every grocery store has. But then I'm like, oh, I can go in this book and I can see the chuck eye steak. But there's other things that are in that chapter that can kind of be cooked the same way. So you almost can mix and match the different cuts of meat because they kind of share the same characteristics. And in a lot of the recipes, I'll have different cuts of meat. Like if you can't find this, substitute with this, so that you can start cooking these recipes that really catch your eye, but you can also interchange the meat into something that's similar. And I really think that'll help out someone who's just trying to figure out how they're going to take some of these cuts from the grocery store and make them into a nice dish. And then you're getting a little more comfortable. You're like, okay, I'm feeling these recipes. Then you might start some of the more intricate recipes. And then you might want to, okay, now I'm going to get to the butchery part. I'm feeling good about this recipe. This would be great if I could have these steaks more often if I go ahead and cut them myself. So that's kind of the progression. And I always say this is kind of like an addictive hobby too, because once you start learning where these cuts of meat come from and how you can make them taste really good and you can get them for cheaper, your eyes get open to the whole world and you start like, okay, what else can I do?
So where do guys go wrong? Because the book is very in depth. You've got the very detailed instructions. You've got links to the different things. You've got a breakdown on the accessories, how to care for your knives, and you literally go into so much detail in each section. It's phenomenal. But where do you find guys go wrong? Do they go and pick the most expensive kind of meat and they don't have the facilities to store it, so they end up wasting it, or do they maybe cut it wrong because they don't really pay attention, or do we maybe not have a sharp enough knife, or what kind of issues do you see if people misuse the book in that way?
Yeah, I definitely think getting some proper tools is really helpful. Making sure you have a nice sharp knife; those are just like basic cooking. You should have those anyway, right? You should keep everything nice and sharp. And I think also some people they just think some our guys in particular. We get grilling on the brain. Okay,
Yep.
I take a big piece of meat and all I know how to do is put it on the grill and take it off the grill. That's what I got. And I think you're missing out on a ton of different flavors, different textures, different cuts of meat just by, not grilling everything. That was one of the important parts of this book for me, was to not just say, all right, throw it on the grill and you're done, or throw it on the smoker. We have those recipes on there, but I wanted to show also to increase your cooking prowess. So you can cook stuff inside. You can get a nice sear. You can use a nice cast iron pan, and it'll really take your meat cookery to another level. And that's what I want to I do think people make a little bit of a mistake of just not opening their eyes to everything that beef can do, like all the different flavors you can get out of it.
So we've kind of gone into maybe somebody started following a recipe and they've gone away, they've girlfriend's gone away smiling, and or they've cooked for their in-laws or whatever it is, and they think, yes, I am now ready, I am going to go into the next step. For people who don't have a Brad in their life, I mean, you go into there, you show the anatomies, you talk about how each kind of cat, the primal cats and the subcats can then be modified to what they're best for cooking and how they can be used, etc., and what they do well. How do we go to our butcher and say, I want this or I want that? Do we take your book and just go, that? How can we build that relationship with a butcher, but explain it so we're not just buying a pack from the supermarket, the retail packs? We're actually experiencing the Brad effect.
Yeah, I think it's reading the book and learning learning the names for the different cuts. So they're pretty ubiquitous, but sometimes it's a little tricky. So a lot of times they'll shift the names slightly, sometimes completely, but you're going to have to explain that where that thing comes from. And if you read the book and you really it comes from the chuck, and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, they know what the chuck is called. So you're going to be able to communicate with your butcher. The funny part is when you start throwing around terms that nobody else throws around, you instantly get some credibility of, you go to a Costco or a Sam's and you're like, hey, I need a chuck roll. And they're like, wait a second, how do you know what that is? Like, what are you doing? What are you doing over there? And you're like, hey, I'm trying to get a Denver steak, or I'm trying to get a chuck eye steak from it. And then you instantly get credibility. They just look at you differently. They talk to you differently. You're using the vernacular of the butcher into getting that right cut. If you're going to go to your butcher too, you're going to a local butcher shop, then you can start really having a relationship and talking to them and going, okay, this is what I'm looking for. I saw it in this book. It's a chuck eye steak. But if you don't have that, what is like that? Help me. I want that similar taste and flavor profile. What could you suggest instead? So you really you get a much more personalized service at a butcher shop. They're going to help you out. And again, you throw around some of those terms, you're going to have your instant friends with the butcher.
It's time for a quick break. There are millions of potential products to buy, so how do you know which ones are worth your hard-earned money? Simple. You go to nextlevelguy.com/affiliates and explore those that will transform and improve your life. You'll find deals, listener exclusives, and special offers with some great companies. Recommendations are 100% honest and only on items Ian has tried or believes in. The companies showcased will make you a better man in all areas of your life. Simply go to nextlevelguy.com/affiliates and level up.
I think that's something that we struggle with is we kind of go, okay, I've got beef. I'm going to I'll make mince. I'll make meat. And you can see how limited our brains are. But when you go into the book, you're kind of like, oh, that's amazing. I never thought about that. Oh, I'll try that. And then you could take that to your butcher and say, this is what I like. This is what in this recipe. How could I get to that? Or what's a similar thing I could do with this? And I think they love that. They love kind of showcasing their expertise because they spend all their life learning and catting and cooking, like your fine self has done. But you talk, there's things like the Denver, the flat iron, and I remember reading somewhere it was there was like particular cuts of meat that a butcher keeps to themselves because they're so good. And I'm trying to think what it was, but what are the cuts that are like the underdogs of the cow, the underdogs of the animal, where you think that's what you have to get? That's why you should be a friend with your butcher.
Some of my favorite cuts are those little off cuts, those secret cuts, and so I love the chuck eye steak and the Denver steak, which I've talked about so far. Those are in the Chuck Primal cut. Also in the Chuck Primal cut, there is the flat iron, like you said. Now I have fallen in love with the flat iron. I always liked it, but I had it the other day, and I'm like, man, this is a great piece of meat. It's tender. It's from the chuck, so it's a little bit cheaper, but man, it has so much flavor. Another one that people may not have heard of is called the Terrace Major, and it is another one out of the chuck. It looks like a little beef tenderloin, and it is not quite as tender as the tenderloin, but it is like the second most tender piece of meat on the cow, and it's like $10 a pound. So it's, a third of the price of what you're going to get for a tenderloin. And again, they're a little, you got to search. It's a little bit harder to find, but when you find it, it's so good.
Because that's something you do go into the book. It's almost like this extra journey of knowledge where you explain how these types of cats don't make money for supermarkets, so they very rarely have them because they're more specialist and they're probably more expensive. And does it can bother you that a lot of people don't know the amount of work that goes into the meat, the aging, what they're fed on? They don't understand the difference between organic or like what fat actually is on a meat. Like you talk about how when you cut open a packet, the red isn't blood. The red liquid isn't blood. It's actually the mygoblin and things like that. Do we not understand enough about what we eat to really, and I like that's how your book explains these sort of things, but does it concern you that a lot of people don't really understand what they're eating, so they just buy the same thing over and over again?
I think we are getting very far from what we eat, as like where it comes from, where the meat has traveled to get to us, how many hands it's been through, how the meat is broken down, and how we get it at the store. I mean, the further we get from it, where it's just a package with cellophane on it, it's really hard to appreciate that piece of meat. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to write the book, is like, there's a whole world out there. Like, that cow did a lot. It took a lot of stuff to get that into your hands. So make sure we appreciate it. Make sure we can make good choices, because again, when different terminology gets involved, we may not understand what that means, what grass-fed means, what grain-fed means. So it is important to, when you're making those decisions at the grocery store, that you understand what those things really mean. So yeah, the more knowledge you have when you go to the grocery store, the better.
Because that is something that when I started watching it, I was like your videos. I was like, oh, that's cool. I really want to get a mincer. Oh, that's really cool. I really want to get like a really nice Japanese catty knife. Oh, my bank balance would have hated you, because coming up to like Black Friday and all that, I was sitting there going, oh, I could get that. but for people who are worried about doing it wrong, and these are expensive cuts of meat, but you show the proportion of what you could make from a big cut of meat compared to what you could buy in a store for the same price. But for people who are worried about doing it wrong, what are the red lines that we should never cross for defrosting, marinating, cutting? What are the things that you just go, doesn't matter what about this little nuance here, but that's a back away now? Because you said something in one of the books, for example, that 10 minutes out of the fridge isn't bringing it up to room temperature. It takes 4 hours to bring it up. That kind of was like, oh, fuck. That was really, like, I learned so much from just reading the book for prepping. I can't wait to get into making a lot more of the stuff. But what are the red lines we should just back away? That's the danger territory.
I think in the big picture, you want to make sure everything is safe. You want to make sure everything is cold. That you're storing it properly. A vacuum sealer is your friend because it'll make that environment so that it lasts longer, so the meat doesn't spoil as quickly. Those are kind of the basics. Beef is really great because you can cook it you can cook it at medium. It's not like chicken or anything. You can have a medium rare steak or medium rare hamburger, as long as you keep everything fresh and take care of it. Those are the safety guidelines. As far as when you're cutting it, you want to make sure that there's nothing really that's going to ruin the piece of meat. So if you take your knife and you are trying to cut off a ribeye and then it's slightly off and it's a little bit wonky cut, it's still going to be okay. You're not, it's not, brain surgery here. We are just taking that, if you got a steak that has a little bit of an uneven edge on it, you're going to be fine. There is one thing, like when you're doing a tenderloin. So this is one that's easy to there is that thick silver skin that's on a tenderloin, and that needs to be removed. A lot of times grocery stores won't do that. I've done videos where I went to the grocery store and kind of rate it, kind of see what they're doing. And everyone I ever go to has a tenderloin that has this thick silver skin on it that you're just going to chew and chew and chew and never be able to swallow it. It's just it's not good. But that is one of the things where you need to learn the difference to what is silver skin, what is fat, what is this light sinew that can be removed, and what can stay on there and what can't stay on there. I think those are good things to learn just so you have a better experience with your steak cutting and your steak eating.
Because you do have a lot of great photos about how to cut into it, and you kind of explain the little parts of don't cut too much in here, cut this bit off here, and you see it from different angles. And then you also have the YouTube videos which are there to sort of back up if anybody's sort of struggling. But how do you go from using your cameras and things like that to using your teaching skills, where because you've taught in culinary schools and that, how because you're now teaching the world how to cook, eat, select meat, cut better. How have you tried to balance that low denominator person who can barely use a knife to the person who thinks, I'm going to make this artistic 3D beautiful meal? How did you balance that in your book from people like me who don't know what they're doing to actual people who are not for professional chefs, but they're getting there?
Yeah, I think it's having an array of skill of not skill levels, but intricacy levels of the recipes. Some are very easy, where we're grilling, we're sautéing, we're doing searing the outside. I give you lots of tips on how to determine doneness, because I think that is the biggest thing that a person who is new to cooking or uncomfortable or doesn't consider themselves a chef, determining steak doneness, I think, is one of the most important things, because everyone has their kind of I like it medium, I like it medium rare, I like it medium well. And I give you several ways in the book to test for doneness. It's hard because when you're doing a restaurant setting, everyone does things by feel, right? So you touch the
Yeah.
steak and then you can kind of tell, but that's because you've done it hundreds and hundreds of times. Well, the person in their kitchen has not done it 100 times, so they're not going to be able to. I'm not going to be able to tell you how it feels. That's a hard thing to show. So we work on temperatures. Temperatures is the best way to determine doneness. So how to use a meat thermometer, how to use a wireless meat thermometer that will tell you the internal temperature while it's cooking. So I think the more times you do it, the more times you get comfortable with it. And when you nail it, you're like, I nailed it and I got this and I can do it again. So, like I said, I think finding the recipes that you like and then like testing yourself and going like, oh, I made this one. We threw it on the grill. Let's try this next time. Oh, let's do a reverse sear on this one where we smoke it first at a low temperature and then sear it and finish it at a high temperature. So it's the same process. It's just that extra step, and that extra step's going to add a little more flavor and a little more texture. So I think it's baby steps, and then you're off to the races.
Why that's a really good point. You're talking about like the doneness factor of it. Why is that? Like that you go to this restaurant A, and the medium there will be completely different to the medium in restaurant B. I would assume they would have just used the thermometers. I mean, I can remember making steaks which look burnt on the outside, but they're almost red on the inside. How how is there a sort of general accepted that's the way to cook a steak? And like that you would recommend to people, but also why is there such a discrepancy in lots of places? Is it just they're rushing to get it out, or they haven't let rest it to rest properly, or where do these issues come from?
So in a restaurant setting, you're looking at so much volume that they're not taking temperatures like with thermometers to each steak because we're doing hundreds of steaks. So that's where you will get where that is that feel where what a medium rare is, like a medium, but again, it's hard because a medium rare tenderloin feels differently than a medium rare New York strip. You have to learn that the different cuts of meat even feel differently when they've come to those certain temperatures. And that's the reason that you're going to get a different temperature or a different doneness from each place you go, is because that individual cook has developed like a sense, a feel for when that steak is done. And, everybody's a little bit different because that was one thing when you're working in a steakhouse, you see everything where people are like, they're bringing back their steak because it's, they wanted it medium but they really wanted medium well because they just don't know
They don't
exactly
trust
what
the
that
red or
temperature.
not.
Yeah. Like I want, I want it, medium, but with no pink. Well, that's not, or a medium, they'll say something that's contradictory and you're like, well, I kind of understand what you're saying. I'm going to guess. And hopefully we get to something that's good. But, doing the temperature, there is a temperature gauge, guard, or not guide. That's what I'm trying to say. There is a temperature guide for what is universally a rare, medium steak. So, when you're doing it at home, that's the best way because you only got one or two steaks to deal with, so you can get them right, as you're cooking them.
So what's then the balance between tenderness versus flavor versus time, versus mopping up? Because I mean, you were talking there about how you were going to, I'm going to reverse sear this, we're going to try a bit of this and that, and I think that a lot of times we, especially if you're trying to bulk in the gym, if you're like on the carnivore diet and all these sorts of things, people are wanting to lose weight, but they don't want to just eat the same thing over and over. How do we keep the flavor? How do we add the tenderness? How can we use the rubs, the tallow, all these little nuance things that you mentioned in the book to actually add flavor to what could potentially be just the same meat over and over again? How do you find, because you were cooking for yourself as much because you were on the carnivore diet, how
Yeah, I did a little carnivore diet experiment. Yeah, it was pretty interesting.
what did that teach you then about variety, tenderness, flavor, kind of impacting that, because you haven't got a wide range of things you can eat on that diet?
Yeah, I think it's how you cook it can change the flavor and texture immensely. So what you think about, if I'm going to grill a steak, I can also put that in a cast iron steak. I can get a nice hard sear on it where it's crispy on top all the way across. That gives another texture. I could take another piece of meat that's more that's tougher, and I can braise it and shred the whole thing to where it's softer. So it's completely soft and shreddable. So that's all the same muscle. It's just different places of the cow. So there is a wide variety. It's also knowing which cuts of meat to go ahead and cook for a long time or cook for a short time. So like you had mentioned a little bit, but there's an anecdote where it says the most tender cuts of meat are furthest away from the hoof and the horn. So you'll see in a lot of every beginning of the chapter of the book, there is a cow diagram that shows where on the cow that primal cut is. And you can kind of like look at it and go, okay, well, that is the round, and it's really close to the hoof. So I know that's going to be a tougher cut of meat or tougher area. There may be some little exceptions to the rules from different cuts, but that one's going to be one I'm going to want to braise, or I'm going to want to stew, or cook very, very quickly so it doesn't have a chance to get tough. But if I get in that middle range, I'm going to have a problem. So I will find that when you're thinking about when you're thinking about tenderness and flavor, it's an inverse reaction. So the tougher the cut of meat, the more flavorful it is. What happens is that muscle gets a lot of work when the cow is just walking around doing its thing. So it builds up, that muscle group builds up more flavor, but it's also tougher. That's why when you think about most tender is the tenderloin, right? Well, that has about the least amount of flavor out of any cut on the cow. So you got to balance the two. And there are some cuts that do those things really well, but still there's a good, you take a tough cut of meat and you cook it all day or for several hours and shred that thing. It's so good too. And it's a different experience.
I'm salivating. I'm just like, I could go and eat. I could go and eat stuff. For what are like the big flavors? What are the ones where it's maybe a kind of a rougher cut, a harder cut, where you think, well, actually, if you put this rub on it, or if you prepare it in this way, are there things that we must try that are outside of the usual remit, or are there recipes that you think this would sell? This is worth the book alone that people have to use.
Yeah, so like I'm using a tougher cut of meat on the like a red wine braised short rib. I have that recipe in the book. So the short ribs, very, very tough cut of meat, but on the bone, and you sear it, get some flavor going. You make a flavorful liquid to braise that in and let it cook for several hours. And it just, the texture of it, you can reduce that sauce and to where it just is very like thick and pourable and covers the whole short rib. And that is just like especially now that we're getting into the fall, winter, it's like a wonderful fall winter dish. One kind of funny within this same kind of short rib of vein, I did a McRib. So at McDonald's, they bring back that McRib. Well, I made one from scratch and used the short ribs, braised them so you could pull the bones out, and made a sandwich out of it. And I'm like, my son, he's one of my sons is a big foodie in the family, and that was his favorite recipe in the whole book because he tasted almost all of them, and it was like, this is really, really good. I don't even know if he had the real McRib, but it was just some fun stuff you can do that just not. Cooking doesn't always have to be serious. You can be playful and fun. So,
because one of the things I love to do is like whenever I'm reviewing a book or whatever it is, I'll go and look at reviews, and I noticed that a lot of people were reviewing it saying, "This is amazing. Some of the meals I've made are so nice, and I've learned so much." But one of the big things was about the butcher skills in there. A lot of them were saying it was such a key point of why they wanted to buy the book, especially because they were fans of your channel. Do you think now butchery skills have become a must learn because of the cost of meat and stuff, versus actually just be nice to know. We really need to learn this. We need to learn where our food's coming from and how to make the penny stretch towards the pound or the dollar in your case.
I really think it should be, everyone should know these things. I think that's one of the reasons that my channel has done as well as it has, is just because people didn't even know what you don't know what you don't know. I'm here like just shouting from the rooftops going, hey, you can save a bunch of money by cutting it yourself. And it's not that hard. That's the thing that's most surprising to people, is that when you get down to it, it's not really that difficult. There are some very intricate things that professional butchers do. I'm breaking down an entire half cow or entire quarter is very difficult to do and takes a lot of practice. And those guys are really, really good at it. The cuts that we get are not, it's not that hard. So I think it's most important that people know how to do this. Even if they don't want to do it themselves, at least know that, like, yeah, this is available. You can take a big ribeye and cut it into small ribeyes and save money. And, I don't know, it could help out in a pinch. Like, we got the holidays coming up. You want to do a nice prime rib. Well, instead of paying $25 a pound, or more, now I can cut it myself and, decrease the price by half. So
jeez,
I don't know. It seems to me like something that people should know. And there are a lot of people who want to know about it. So I'm here to teach them how to do it.
do you think that's like kind of like a confidence ladder where people like yourself, where you go to a restaurant and there's that much competition, you have to have better dishes than the next people, you have to expand in this area, but when we're cooking for ourselves or our family, it doesn't really matter as much. So we don't have that kind of that push. And what are these kind of like, what progression would you want to see somebody, what should they start with and then progress from there?
I always say, for the butchery stuff, I always say that the ribeyes and the strips are the easiest thing because we're just doing straight slices. The tenderloin gets a little bit more technical because you got to take some silver skin off. But I got to start with some of those steak cuts. Those also are going to get you the most bang for your buck. You're going to get the most like expensive cuts for a lot less. So you're going to save the most money by doing those kind of things. Then when you want to get into something a little bit more technical, you want to do a chuck roll, because that's the next thing that's available for the home cook to go find is a chuck roll. And then you can get those steaks out of the chuck roll. You can grind it. You can, grind the trim. You can make chuck roast, and you can save money by doing all that stuff too. So that's kind of the general progression. But there's, depending on what you can find in your area too, you can go to get a sirloin. You can get all kinds of different cuts that you can go ahead and further break down. So, but again, I always like people to start out with those ones that are like going to save them the most money, and the ones that they think are like special occasion foods. And that way you can have them a little more often.
It's like, I was just looking through, remembering like earlier when I was looking through the pages, there were so much options for you, even just, like the chuck, the flank. It was like each area you were just like, here's 15 recipes you can do right now, and here's how to progressively make them more difficult. Here's how you can batch this. Here's how you can, you show respect to the whole animal. You're not just saying, here, buy this really expensive thing and only do one recipe from it. You're going, here's how you can feed your family. Here's how you can progress, learn, grow, but also fill your belly and that of your loved ones while you're doing it. And I think that's such a skill to be able to teach people. But in the book, you talk a lot about patience. We need to rest things. We need to slice it correctly. We need to make sure that it's bagged correctly. Where do guys go wrong in that sense? Where do we lose the money? Do you find, is it that we don't buy it correctly and then we get freezer burn? Are we not allowing stuff to rest properly? What does it, and how do we build that habit of planning into our cooking and prepping, etc.?
Yeah, I think it starts with meat selection. It starts with, knowing the difference between choice grade and prime grade. Maybe you can tell that it's more expensive, but sometimes the prime grade is not is not worth you're not getting the bang for your buck. It's not worth the higher price. Then it's storing it. It's like taking it through the entire progression, storing it, making sure that the vacuum seal is still sealed. When you take it out of the package, letting it kind of, I like to, especially these things that are cryovac, so they have a vacuum seal pack. It's best to take it out of the package and let it rest for a little bit because it's been in this vacuum environment. Just let it, let it take 30 minutes in the fridge and just relax. A technique that I've really enjoyed doing is salting a little bit before. That was one of the things I did not believe in was salting the meat and letting it sit for overnight or 4 hours.
Yeah.
I did a test on my channel and yes, I'm now a convert because there's one of those techniques. I'm like, oh, this really works. But you can't do it in a restaurant because you can't do that to 100 steaks, but you can do it to your one steak. So, but again, I think guys go wrong with just not taking the appropriate amount of time. Don't just throw it quickly on the grill, get, and eat it real quick. Enjoy your food, enjoy what you're doing, let it rest after it's cooked, season it properly. I mean, just enjoy it because these cuts of meat where you pay lots of money for, just take your time, enjoy it, enjoy your life, the finer things in life.
I think because that is a beautiful way of saying it, because it's like, how often do you see guys just kind of going, yeah, throw it in a pan for a couple of minutes, yeah, it's fine, and I've just eaten it straight away, but I don't understand why there's all this blood on my plate. It's like, if you're paying all this money for it, if you're putting all this effort into it, why not treat it right? Why not use it like, you wouldn't put, what was it they say? You wouldn't put cheap petrol into a Ferrari. Like, why not use and really get every penny you can out of this amazing gift that you're able to do? Because in the book and through your channel, do you find that you're in the best of both worlds? That if you're wanting to try a recipe and you think, what if I did this? You've then got your YouTube channel to fall back on to then go, I'm going to make an experiment of this. I'm going to go and do this. And, I'm going to teach this. Oh, so-and-so said they're struggling with this in the comments. I can do videos on this. That this ecosystem that you're built allows you that kind of to explore your own skills as much as help people master. Because you've said, I wrote it, where was it? It's not one big lesson, it's thousands of tiny ones.
Yeah, that's interesting you put it like that because on my YouTube channel, I have it's mainly butchery videos. Whenever I try to do a cooking video, it doesn't really do that well. My audience really wants to see the butchering part, wants to see how to save money, how to go to the grocery store and what to buy. So I end up having a bunch of meat in my freezer, first of all, and I don't fully get to explore how to make a recipe and pushing those limits and trying those things as much as I'd like to. So that is one thing with this book, was the challenge of finding all these recipes and thinking of throughout my entire career of I did this sauce here and we kind of did this preparation here. What if I mix them around, or making some just up on the fly and using creativity to just, build something completely new. It was such a good experience. It was difficult, I will give you that, because when we did the initial draft of the book, or the table of contents for the publisher, they're like, we need about 100 recipes. And I'm like, okay, no problem. I got this. I started going down. And once I hit about 40, I was like, oh no, what do I do now? How am I going to fill out the rest of these recipes? So it was a great creativity exercise. And, it gets people thinking, hell yeah, I can do this. I have 2 salads or 3 salads that have steak on them. And it's like, they're all completely different flavor profiles, but it's like, maybe someone's not thinking about putting steak on a salad, but you can, or on a pizza, on a sandwich. Like, I just trying to come up with these different creative recipes. It was a lot of fun, and it did stretch my brain a lot. So that was a good thing. But again, on my YouTube channel, it's mainly people like to see butchery videos. So that's what I keep giving them.
I mean, the variety in the book is amazing, but there's this beautiful dedication at the start to your wife, where you've said she does your photography, she's doing a lot of the descriptions, she put up with a lot of your, like you were talking about, your creativity, your kind of just this project where you've gone, I've got millions of viewers. Oh, I know what I'm going to do. I am now going to go and create a book. You've kind of, you were saying that she's long suffering and like she puts up with your madness, but she completes you. She makes you you. What has this taught you doing this project together and like as a family and kind of bouncing off and learning and growing for each other? And do your kids now still not? Are they not impressed with your YouTube career?
So there's a lot of questions there. So my wife was a trooper because basically I said yes to this project, and then I'm like, how are we going to deal with this? And like, of course, me and my wife have been together for a very long time. We met in high school, so there's been a lot of times in my life where I have relied on her and pulled her into these situations, and this was one of the bigger ones. But I was like, okay, we got to do this. We got to take all the pictures. We got to make all the recipes. And I don't ever follow recipes in my own cooking. I very rarely follow a recipe. So we had to write them, and I would just spout off like, yeah, we're going to put this and this together, and this is why I'm doing this. And she's taking notes the whole time and then made it cohesive and made it sound like something. And it was really, really amazing. So our communication was really good throughout this. Now it wasn't all roses. There were a couple of arguments in there, and a couple of like, man, I don't want to do another recipe. It's like, we're going to do another one. And it was great. It was great to work with her, and my kids were great. They were official taste testers for a couple of them were when they were home. And it just all came together really nicely. And my kids do keep me grounded on the YouTubes because at very first when it blew up, they were like, this is really cool. You're a YouTuber. And I was like, okay, what is that? And then now they're like, oh yeah, my dad, he just does YouTube videos. So, they're unimpressed.
I love that in the book where you're talking about the progression. It's blowing your mind when you're logging on going, what the, I think one video was over like 1 million views and your kids were just like, yeah, well, okay. Yeah, no, it just shows the difference. It's that moment into it. It's like creator versus people who are consuming it, and they're just like, And I can still remember getting 3 views, and I was going, "Oh, this is amazing, best ever." I can't imagine the level of skill that you have, but for people who are wanting to take this book and they're wanting to get better, they're wanting to use it as a competent sort of skill ladder, they're wanting to turn food into a celebration, they're wanting to provide for their family again and do it a lot cheaper than like these supermarkets are wanting to screw us with. How should we use the book? Because I think that's the thing, is it can be kind of like, whoa, this is 100 recipes and it's just beef alone. Obviously there'll be other books coming on and you'll be a superstar and you'll be on Celebrity Chef and all these kind of things. How can we use this book as somebody who's wanting to improve their cooking? Give them, like, say, 30 days. What would you want to see them be able to do in a month or come ready for the next step? I know that's about 50 questions, sorry.
It's all right. I think it's just a progression of what you're comfortable with. So wherever you're starting, I believe that this book, someone who is beginner, medium, or advanced could grab the book and get something out of it. So whether you want to jump right into the butchery stuff, whether you want to start out with the comfort meals, the comfort style meals, those are pretty straightforward. And then you just kind of get into it and you're like, okay, we're making, there's a meatloaf in there. So, okay, we're making meatloaf. Well, maybe I want to grind my own meat. So maybe let's go to the grinding chapter and let's figure out the tips and the tricks and how to grind your own meat, because you're going to get a fresher product if you know, and you're going to use some of the scraps that you have around. So there's simple progression things, because there's so many directions you can go to. And simply just go take your steak and go sear it properly. Sear it, cook it properly, cook it to the right doneness, season it properly, let it rest, slice it. It's an easy process, but sometimes you need someone to say, hey, do it like this. You know, try it like this. And I think that's one thing that the book does, especially if you're a beginner, is you can pick a recipe, and a lot of them are, the cooking of the meat is relatively simple, and it's repeated over and over in the book, because if you're going to put a piece of grilled steak on top of a salad, well, that's the same procedure as putting a grilled steak with this sauce and with the mashed potatoes that are in there. You know, it's the same procedure. It's just repeated over and over and over again. And then you get that confidence of like, hey, yeah, I've done this before. I can do this. What's next? What else can I do? I want to do some of the ones that are more intricate recipes that take a little longer. Maybe I want to make my own beef jerky. I have a beef jerky recipe in there that is so good. It's one. It has to be almost, I say they're all my favorite, but that's a great recipe. And it takes a little bit of time. It's a hands-off time, but it's like, you know, I'm feeling more comfortable of like, oh yeah, I can make beef jerky, because, you know, on the Butcher Wizard channel, I showed you how you're going to save like $35 a pound on beef jerky. So this is how you do it, you know? So I don't know. It's just, it can take you in so many directions. And I think there's something in there for everybody.
Oh, there's definitely something for everybody, because just I was going through it, like, well, you know, leaving little stickies going, right, that's getting done. Oh, I need to do that. I'm going to batch that, stick that in the freezer. And before I knew it, I was like, the whole thing was almost highlighted. I was just like, all right, let's just start doing the whole book. How did it happen with you? Because you were talking at the start of the book about, you know, what you did when you started seeing Angel cooking. You talked about working with Kent. You've talked about how, you know, you back and forth with your wife about your cooking journey. How was it therapeutic to kind of put your life story into this book as much as the skills it was actually putting you onto the pages?
It was an interesting experience, because I feel like because a lot of people are discovering me from my YouTube channel, where that's a little bit of a personal interaction. It's not just a recipe blog. It's not just a picture. You know, we're having a moment here in my kitchen, which I'm in right now. But this is, you know, this is what we're doing. And so I wanted to keep it a little personal. So I did have to go back in my mind and find some of these stories. And you realize like, oh yeah, I remember that story, or this was a cool story to put in there. And then I ended up with that whole section in the book about the different people I worked with, the different times, different restaurants I worked at, where it all kind of started for me. And I think it's an interesting read. So I hope people don't just skip through those pages and actually read them, because it was very therapeutic, and it's cool just to I think it's just cool to put your life on there and just go. It makes you go back and think of all these experiences that you've had. And I think everyone should try to do that and try to think about these things that you are these experiences you've had that are hard to remember. You may have been younger, but I think it's great to go back and try to figure those out and revisit those.
No, yeah, it was really good to see what made you you. You know, it's because we see you behind the camera as this confident, like charming guy who is like an expert and can showcase these things, but to kind of know your story as much. We come along the journey with you as well. We learn about you as a person, which makes us then become deeper fans of you, to kind of bond with you. What was when you look back now, was there that moment that you can think, or that lesson that changed it all, that suddenly made this where you went from, I'm not just a cook, I'm a craftsman, I'm bloody good at this, I can change the world through meat? I know that's probably not how you put a CV, but
but I just think throughout everything builds on each other. So every time I worked at a place, I tried to get every piece of knowledge I could out of it, and I moved on to another one. And it was it's just a conglomeration of all those experiences. And I think the through line for the whole thing is just getting better. It's just wanting to get better at a certain thing. And I just pointed towards cooking, kind of in happenstance because of those early jobs, and I really like them. So I just think it's all a stepping stone. Everything is a stepping stone. And then when you finally get somewhere where you can share everything you've learned, it's really great. It's a really great experience. It's a profound where you can like teach somebody else. Hey, yes, I've been through this. I've done, even if it's something as mundane as cooking, but like, yes, you can do this and this and this, and it comes out like that. You teach. When I was a culinary school teacher, I taught all the way. I taught 18-year-olds all the way to 50 and 60-year-olds, and you have to teach everybody a little differently and come at things a little differently. And I think that's helped me out with YouTube because I can teach in different ways in different videos or different parts of it, trying to continue to be entertaining because you got to keep it. People got to be interested or they're not going to watch it and they're not going to learn anything. So I think it's just all these different experiences really came together with what I'm doing now. And it's coming together so well and people are really liking it. And I just can't thank everybody enough. Like I'm just, every time I'm like, man, somebody watched my video. That's awesome. That's good. It really feels good to be able to share all this.
No, I mean, and that's, we should be saying thank you to you, because the joy, the love, the passion we get from watching your videos, and also knowing that we're eating better, we're feeding our families better, we're learning to save money. It's, you're putting joy, skill, mastery, entertainment, like all this amazing information out in the world. And that's why this book should be a major success, because the love, the dedication. I mean, it took you a year to put this together. It shows in the pages. This isn't just I'm going to make a bit of money off this. This is like a man's love of cooking, butchery, teaching, all put into the pages. I know I'm going to put you on the spot here, but why should we buy a copy? If you had this as a sales pitch, I know we've just spoken for over an hour about this, but how would you sell this as a must-have in somebody's kitchen compared to the Gordon Ramsay, the the Whites, the Heston books? Why should we have this in our library?
I think that the art of butchery is going away because people aren't understanding a lot of where their food comes from and how they can be part of the process. So I really believe that this book is important to have so that you can learn these simple techniques and keep that butchery kind of art alive, because we're getting so far from it that it's just really hard to even know where that piece of meat came from on the cow and how to cook it right. So I just think that everybody could use something from, every meat eater could use something from this book. And it just teaches you the basics from start to finish, from how to cut it, how to cook it, how to eat it. It's just I think everyone should have a copy of this book, except if you're vegan, you probably can skip this one because I don't think you're going to be happy with it.
Just wait for the next volume and then that'll be
Maybe Butcher Wizard goes vegan next time. I don't know, maybe.
That'll be an interesting book. I'll give you that. I mean, until we can do another one down the line, I would love to have you back on, because I just find talking to you so easy, but I know I'm using up a lot of your time. But what would you want people to take from this? I mean, hopefully we've given this book the level of selling it requires, that or deserves, sorry, because I genuinely think this is a masterpiece. But what would you want people to remember from this, even if they're maybe not into cooking as much? You've given some great tips about how to build friendships, how to build good habits, how to push for what you want in life. What would you want them to remember as a sort of summary of our chat before the next one?
Yeah, I just think people can really take pride in their food, take pride in what they're doing. I never thought of this book as telling my story as a inspiration for people, but it kind of is, of like how you can just continually do the same thing, getting better and better and better. And, I really think that people just can get a lot out of this book and really need this information, because it's also a skill. And as I know we're for guys, having a new skill is something that we need, that we crave. Like, we need to have some sort of task to master. And I think that butchery can be your next task that you can master. And I just hope this book helps people out. I hope the YouTube channel helps people out. That's all I want. I just want to help.
So what's the evolution going to be? I know that's probably a bit of a wanky question, but how can we expect to see you? Are you going to be releasing like an online service where people can come and learn step by step? Are you going to be doing butchery classes? Are you going to be bringing out another volume of books, which you should, because this one's going to be a bestseller? How are you going to keep expanding on what you're doing?
Well, I think for me, the natural progression is to keep doing what I'm doing on YouTube and keep, there's still a lot to talk about. People ask me all the time, haven't you talked about everything? I go, no, I got a list of videos and things that we can still teach. So I still got work to do there. And then I know this book, who knows, there's going to be another book. We'll see how it goes. I think there's lots of room for other, pork and chicken and fish and all these other things. I did start a membership club. It's called the Primal Cuts Club, where it's a little bit more closer to me. So we have live calls. We have 2 live calls a month where you can ask me questions, or we can do live cuts. And then it has different videos than what's on YouTube. It has like culinary school videos because they're all like top down videos. So it's not me talking as much. It's more of just the facts. So they're shorter and they're more like punchy, and like, we're just how to do this, how to do each thing. So I want to continue to expand that. Next year we got some more plans. Like always, we're gonna hopefully do some seasonings and some sauces, because I know like there's the Primal Cut steak sauce in here, which is really good. I want to, because not everybody wants to make it, so hopefully that people will try it and like it, and maybe we can put it in a bottle and offer it to the public.
Oh yes,
there's a seasoning in there that will be great. So we got a lot of stuff coming down the pipeline. So it's an exciting time for the channel, and we just keep doing more stuff. More stuff I can rope my wife into helping me with.
Well, remember me when you become super famous. Like, I'll be sitting there going, I want some free bottles of this sauce. Like,
absolutely. This is still out of all the interviews I do, I love coming on this show because talking to you is very easy, and it's just like having a chat with a friend, and it's just great.
Well, we need to get you over to the UK and do a tour and do some live workshops and things like that. So how can we follow this journey? How can we get in touch? How can we sign up? How can we, see when the sauce is going to be ready? How can we just be fans and engage with you?
Yeah, my YouTube is my platform that I put the most on. So I do have videos on there of what's coming next and things are happening. So that's probably the one where you have the most updates. I'm also on Instagram. I'm Butcher Wizard everywhere. So whether it's Instagram or TikTok, I got a couple TikTok videos. I know, who would have thought, right? And no dancing though, just butchery content. But there's also the Primal Cuts Club. So that's primalcutsclub.com. And that's been really cool. Like I said, it's a more in-depth experience. And yeah, man, just kind of, like I said, I'm trying to be everywhere, but YouTube is my main thing.
Well, that's it for another week. And thank you for listening. It's now time to take what you've learned and use it to develop and enhance your life with the key points mentioned. Listen, try it, embrace it, use it, and crush it. Now's your time to hit that next level in your life. If you liked this episode, then please leave a comment on the show notes or a review of the show on your podcast platform. Everything helps evolve the show. Until next week, keep seeking the next level in your life.